welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today we're doing my June book haul. This month my book haul is a little bit bigger than normal. I have 13 books to talk about, which for me is a fairly large book haul. For the first half of the year, my hauls have been much smaller than this. But in June, I just really was in the mood to buy books. So some of these are new releases that I had pre-ordered and things that were coming out, but some of it are also just impulse buys because I felt like buying books in June. I feel like this kind of happens every year though, around the middle of the year, around June. I always end up having a larger book haul sometime in the summer around the middle of the year. So this is that one for this year apparently. But yeah, let's just get started. So first up, I have two books that were gifts because my birthday was in June and Kara sent me two books. So the first one is Book of Enchantments, 10 Tales of Wonder by Patricia C. Reedy. This is a collection of short stories by Patricia C. Reedy, who is an author that I grew up loving. She wrote the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, which I loved as a kid. And I have always kind of meant to read more books from her because I loved that series so much and never quite got around to it. This one in particular I wanted to read though because Kara had mentioned once that one of the short stories in this collection is a retelling of The Cruel Sister, which is a folk murder ballad that I really enjoyed as a kid. It was a little bit of an odd song to be really into as a child, a song about sisters murdering each other, but I did really enjoy that song as a kid, so that's why I was really excited to get this book. The other one that she sent me is Fire Logic by Lori J. Marks, which I love this cover. It really it's just very different from a lot of other covers that I've seen. I just enjoy the style of it a lot. So this takes place in a world where there has been martial occupation and there is a resistance rising, and we're following three main characters. One is a scholar, one is a diplomat, and one is a metalsmith who is also half giant, and the three of them are going to come together to change the course of history. But yeah, this is one that I have been really interested in for a long time, so I'm very excited to have this. So thank you, Kara, so much for these. So those are the ones that I got as gifts this month. Then I have quite a few new releases. Some of these are more releases that just came out earlier this year, but I don't remember exactly when. But so, we'll start with Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher. This is a pretty short book. I don't know, this might count as a novella. It's pretty short, but in this we're following Mara, who is the youngest of three princesses. Her older two sisters have been married off, and she is sent to live with nuns. She then finds out that one of her sisters, her life may be in peril. Her sister's husband is very cruel and abusive to her, and her sister may not survive. And so Mara decides to set out to find a way to save her sister, and she has to find a grave witch to help her. She has to complete 3 impossible tasks. She has to kind of cobble together this unlikely band of people to help her save her sister. And I have already read this, and it will be in my June wrap-up, which will be coming soon, but I really enjoyed this. And this was definitely one of my impulse buys. I went to a Barnes & Noble in real life, and I hadn't really intended to pick this one up, but then it just looked so good in person that I had to. Another one that I picked up at the same time, also an impulse buy, was The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. In this, we're following a thief who kind of accidentally saves the life of a prince, and in doing so gets the attention of his father, and then she gets roped into going on a very dangerous, maybe deadly adventure to find a magical artifact. yeah, so this is also like, you know, a recent release that I have been hearing some pretty good things about, so I'm very excited to give this one a try. All right, then some that are more specifically June releases. This is one that I actually didn't know about until after it came out, but it came out at the beginning of June, which is Woman of Light by Khalif Hardo Anstein, which is historical fiction. This was another bit of an impulse buy because one, the cover is so beautiful, and two, the tagline said, "There is one in every generation, a seer who keeps the stories." So I actually don't know too much about this. I think it takes place in the 30s in Denver, and the main character is a seer. It says that as she navigates 1930s Denver, she begins to have visions that transport her to her indigenous homeland in the nearby Lost Territory. Luce recollects her ancestors' origins, how her family flourished, and how they were threatened. She bears witness to the sinister forces that have devastated her people and their homeland for generations. In the end, it is up to Luce to save her family's stories from disappearing into oblivion. So yeah, it sounds really interesting to me. This is like a time period and setting that I haven't read a lot. I'm trying to read more historical fiction, but a lot of the historical fiction that I read kind of all takes place in like early medieval Europe, especially like early medieval like Britain or like, you know, Ireland, Scotland kind of area. So I would like to branch out a little bit with the historical fiction that I'm reading. And this one just sounded really interesting because it has certain elements that I know I like. Like there's a character who is a seer. It's about her connection to like the stories of her ancestors, and that she is the keeper of stories, which are all like more thematic elements or tropes that I enjoy, but it's in like a time period and setting that I don't often read. So I'm very excited for this, and I really hope that I love it, and I already love this cover so much. And then the other June release that I have is Lock Lens by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the third and final book in the Foundry Side trilogy, which is a fantasy series that like has a really interesting magic system in which they kind of like bend reality in a way, because it has this type of magic that they call scriving. It's a written kind of magic for the most part, where they can like write spells onto inanimate objects to convince them to act counter to their nature. And so we're following a kind of like band of characters who are unlikely to get together. There's one who's like a thief, there's one who is very like honorable kind of person, there's a sort of like mad scientist type character, and they are just like this surprising band of characters who've come together to kind of like save the world. But I have really enjoyed this series, and also I always love the covers in this series. Like these covers are so beautiful. I think this is my second favorite cover in the series, but they're all great. But yeah, so excited to continue on with that series. All right, now those are all of the ones that are like recent releases. We'll get into the books that I just bought for other reasons. So first up, I have two books from the same author. The first one is Hild by Nicola Griffith. So I got this because I recently read Spear by Nicola Griffith and I really loved it. I have a whole review for it. That was a Arthurian retelling, so definitely had some like historical inspiration, but was mostly fantasy. This one is historical fiction without any real magic to it. I'm actually currently reading this. I'm about a quarter of the way into it at the moment. But this is about kind of an origin story for Saint Hilda of Whitby. And so in it, we're following Hild from a very young age. She is the youngest niece of a king, and pretty much her whole life, her mother has always told her she has this great destiny to be a great seer, and that her mother is essentially trying to position Hild to be the king's seer. But it's a very precarious position to be in, especially because Hild is like 10 years old. But the king takes her along with him as he travels and does things to be his seer. The other book that I got from Nicola Griffith also is Ammonite, which is, I think this was her debut, and this is a sci-fi, which I don't tend to read a lot of sci-fi, but I've been wanting to get more into it. Historical fiction and sci-fi are kind of like my genres that I'm trying to figure out what I like and trying to get into. But one of the reasons that I wanted to pick this one up was because I really liked Nicola Griffith's writing in Spear, and I find that I think one of the reasons that I don't tend to read a lot of sci-fi is just the writing style in sci-fi often doesn't work for me. Of course, I'm sure there are like exceptions, but very often I feel like sci-fi tends to have a more dry or straightforward or technical kind of writing style, and I tend to go for things that are a little bit more lyrical and atmospheric and that kind of thing in writing, which is much easier to find in fantasy and more difficult to find in sci-fi just because of the nature of the genre. So like, I understand that that might just be the nature of the genre, but I'm kind of hoping that maybe I could find some sci-fi that I would enjoy the writing that would have more of that like lyrical atmosphere just about a sci-fi story. So that's what I'm kind of hoping here, because I enjoyed her writing in Spear so much, that maybe this will be a sci-fi that I enjoy the writing. But I actually don't know too much about what this is about. I do know that it does involve a virus, which I'm not super excited about. I have been in the camp of like avoiding plague books since COVID, so we'll see how it goes, but I'm gonna give it a try. Okay, after that, I also picked up Hunted by Megan Spooner. This is a YA Beauty and the Beast retelling. I read a different book from Megan Spooner, which was Sherwood, which was a Robin Hood retelling, and I really enjoyed that one, so I want to read something else from her. I think this was published before Sherwood, and I've heard that it's not quite as good as Sherwood, but I'm still intrigued. I want to give it a try. I don't know too much else about it, other than that I think that Beauty in this one might actually like be a hunter. Maybe. I don't know. Then I have Black Ships by Jo Graham. This was definitely one of my impulse buys, and I don't at all remember what it's about, so we're gonna read the description for it. So it says, in a time of war and doubt, Gull is an oracle, daughter of a slave taken from fallen Troy, chosen at the age of 7 to be the voice of the Lady of the Dead. She is destined to counsel kings. In the last shadowed days of the Age of Bronze, one woman dreams of the world beginning anew. This is her story. Well, that sounds cool. That makes sense to me why I bought this, because I completely forgot why I decided to buy this book. But yeah, I mean, love a story about like a seer or an oracle. I'm very intrigued by this, and this is one that I really love. This cover, this art style, just like there's a certain type of book that I feel like has this art style, and I have enjoyed those books. It's just like one of those things that it sort of like rings a bell in my mind of like, yes, this is a cover of a book that I would like. I don't know. Then another one of my impulse buys that we'll have to read the back for is Bard by Keith Taylor. It says, the ancient magic of Ireland let loose in the strings of a harp. So this I think might be an Arthurian retelling. I think this is one that came up because at one point after I read Spear and I did a video that was recommendations for Arthurian adjacent retellings, I just did a little more like research about other Arthurian retellings I might be interested in, and I think this one came up. I think that's how I found this. But it says, The wilderness of oak, ash, and thorn that men call the forest of Andred existed long before the Saxons entered Britain or Caesar's legions pressed against Kentish resistance, and even before the first iron-using Celts set foot on the island. Here lives the clan of Mandrake, the strange, gnarled, vegetable folk. Here trods the unicorn with blue vapor curling softly from nostrils, soft as a woman's breast, and dainty, precise hooves. I'm a little suspicious now that that description was in there, but okay. Precise hooves, lethal as maces. Here are the sacred groves, long abandoned, where druids once fed the trees with human blood. Through this forest of sorcery and a society governed by the sword travels Phelimid MacPhail, Bard of Erin, a descendant of druids, and the Tuath Dildanan, the ancient fairy race of Ireland, armed only with his harp and the fierce magical power of his poetry. Alright, that was a bit of a long description, but yeah, this sounds interesting. I'll see where it goes. I do like things that have this type of setting, and it has like druids in it. It sounds like it's gonna have some interesting magical creatures in it. If you look at the cover, that looks like a mandrake. There's a unicorn with the like blue mist coming off of it, although I'm a little bit suspicious of the writing now that it already compared the blue vapor to a woman's breasts. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't think that's the description I read when I bought this, because sometimes there's like a slightly different description, like on a website versus on the book. So we'll see what happens. Okay, I have 2 more books. So next up is a book that I've already read, but I wanted this edition, which is Nightshine by Tessa Graham. So they did a cover redesign for this, and I really wanted the new cover for the paperback because this cover is so much better. The original cover, hold on, actually, let me get the original cover out because it's so bad. Okay. Alright, this is the original cover, and I hate it so much. It's such a bad cover. This one is so much better, just like aesthetically, the art style, all of it, but also I think this cover matches like the tone of the book a lot better. So very excited for that. Also, the second book is coming out in August, and the cover for that is in this same style. So I really wanted to have this cover for it. Okay, and then the last book that I have is actually a graphic novel, which is Brindle? Is that how you pronounce this? I feel like probably not. So this is actually a translated work. It is about this girl. I've already read this, so this will be in my June wrap up as well. But it is about a girl who was in a fire, and then she wakes up in this like little like fae village, and she doesn't really remember who she is or anything about her past, and then she ends up having to kind of she gets kind of left behind and has to strike out on her own, and finds out that she might have some greater destiny and she might be destined to be part of like a large battle. But I'll talk more about it in my wrap up, but the art of this is absolutely beautiful. Okay, this is just too big to have both me and this in it, but like look how beautiful that is. So the art in this is absolutely gorgeous. All right, so those are all of the books that I got in June. That was quite a lot of books. Some of them clearly I know more about than others. But I'm really hoping that some of my impulse buys pan out, you know, because sometimes it works out and sometimes it really doesn't, so we'll see. But I would love to know if you have read any of these, really any of them, but especially any of the ones that are impulse buys that I know less about. I'd love to know if you've read them, if you have any thoughts about them. But Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!